You're good.
All right, this is October the 25th, 2022, and the class is World Religions, and I'm Jason Ridgeway, filling in for Brother Ted Wheeler. And this is part one today, and we are going to be looking at chapter 5. We're backing up. Last week we looked at chapter 6. We're going back to chapter 5, the Baha'i religion, and look at that. And then we'll.
How do you pronounce that? Because I was struggling with that while doing the outline.
Baha'i.
Baha'i?
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing that I do if I'm looking at some of these religions like Zoroastrianism and stuff, you can go to YouTube and look it up in for you. Like if you're looking at a history, I mean, there's some good stuff on YouTube about the Baha'i religion and Zoroastrianism. And it's short. That's what I like. I mean, my attention span not always the greatest. I can't always sit through and focus on a 2-hour history of one particular group, but they have like 7-12-minute little segments. And it's a lot of them are very, very good. Animated. There's pictures of their buildings and some of their even their idols and different things like that. Especially when we get into Hinduism in November. You haven't looked at Hinduism, correct?
Not yet. No, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. I know you've dove into Islam pretty heavy, which is good, and especially for the Baha'i religion, it's a great benefit because the Baha'i religion actually originated. It is one of the newest major religions in the world because it originated in the 19th century. It started about 1844, and it is an offshoot of Islam. And it is the ones that came, the majority that started this, they came out of Islam. Worldwide, their numbers are about 7 million. In the United States, it's estimated to be about 118,000. It is virtually in almost every country, and it is one of the fastest growing religions in the world today. Actually, as of 2021, that was the last one last year. It was one of the fastest growing. It could be ranked, if you're going to rank it in the world, it could be ranked 4th or 5th largest. Sometimes some of the lists that I've seen have placed the Mormons as their own group. And so the Mormons actually as a group have more members than the Baha'i religion. So because a lot of people don't look at Mormonism as a Christian religion. And so they'll because they consider them a cult. And I would agree that they do fit that cult definition. And it's something that you can look at later on. But in 1844, a young Persian man named Ali Muhammad asserted that he was the next Bab, B-A-B. And Bab is a word that actually means gate, G-A-T-E, a gate. He journeyed to Mecca and made the declaration at the Grand Mosque. Upon returning to Persia, he attracted a sizable group of supporters to whom it became clear that in distinction to the Babs, Ali Muhammad was in fact the Mahdi himself, and thus the direct prophet of God. And if you are following, we're on page 169 of your textbook that you have. His followers became known as the Babis, B-A-B-I-S, or Qaim, Q-A-I-M. and I am. Ali Muhammad never claimed for himself that he was the Mahdi, but his followers were convinced of the idea that, and the Mahdi is like the, like I guess the best way to explain it is kind of like a reincarnation of Muhammad, or the next Muhammad, or the major prophet. The Bobby movement was treated with hostility right from the start. And there's some reasons for this that I found. The reason that they were kind of mistreated is that the established, and it says it here in your book too, but the established Islamic order opposed it because it violated their belief in Muhammad's finality, that Muhammad was the great and only prophet. But they were saying, the Baha'i religion was saying, the Baha'is were saying that no, there's another prophet. And something we'll look at in a minute, that they had this idea that there would come about throughout history different people, in this case different men, that would kind of be the ultimate kind of a change, a direction. And we'll look at that list. It's coming up here in your book. But a lot of the time when you have a new, especially in the Middle East, when a new religion like this or something would begin to develop, or a person would kind of rise to the top, what do you think would happen if you have an established group with established leaders, and then all of a sudden off here to the side, someone else kind of rises up and everyone starts kind of following him? What tends to happen, do you think? What happens with the established group? You have an established, this happened in the New Testament as well.
It's like it's separated from the original religion.
Yeah, and you have with the norm, the standard. You have the group. You have in this case is Islam.
Yeah.
And they're in control of everything. And then now you got someone else that's kind of siphoning off followers.
Okay.
So what happens? What do you think the leaders will do? What kind of mentality will they have if they see their followers running off to another leader?
Aggression towards it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's jealousy.
All right.
When like in the book of Acts, when the Apostle Paul would go into a city, he would first go where?
The synagogue.
The synagogue. If they had a synagogue, exactly. He would go to the synagogue and preach to the Jews. And he would preach Christ. He wouldn't preach the Mosaic law, that they were to follow the Mosaic law. And Jews started believing Paul, and they would go away with Paul and become Christians. And then the leaders in the synagogue, unless it was maybe like Corinth, where you had the leader of the synagogue, he was converted there in Acts 18. But you would have people that would go off, and then you have the leader get all upset and then cause trouble for Paul and anyone else, and kind of kick them out of the city. That's what happened like in Thessalonica. They got kicked out and they went down to Berea. And then when they were in Berea, the people, the Jews in Thessalonica heard about them being down in Berea and went down and stirred up trouble in Berea, because of, Paul was pulling people away from the Jewish faith. And then he would, and once he got kind of kicked out of the synagogue, where would he go? What other group of people would Paul start preaching to?
The Gentiles.
The Gentiles. That wasn't very favorable for the Jews. They didn't like that idea, because the Jews hated the Gentiles. They were two different groups. Of course, that's why, of course, Paul wrote, inspired of God, in Galatians 3:28, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, bond or free, male or female, for we are all one in Christ Jesus. So this is what's going on here at the beginning. Right away, the Muslims are the leaders in this Islamic group, in the order of the day. they're not having this. They're not going to lose their followers. And so it says, you know, the forces of the establishment. That's a kind of a you know, a trigger word. You know, the establishment. The what when you think of that word establishment, what comes to mind? You can't get it wrong because I said what comes to your mind. So when I say establishment, what kind of comes up in your mind?
They run it their way. They change the original religion and start something, their own government.
Okay.
That's one.
A place of business.
The what?
A place of business. I mean, you think of an establishment, people think of where businesses are set up, and they more or less set themselves up.
Okay. Would you say that an establishment is something that is new or that's been there for a long time?
You or their own
New.
The what?
New.
new.
The establishment?
Yeah.
Established means that it's been there for a while.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the establishment, which is the people that are there. I'm glad you know, keep answering. Don't be afraid to answer. Like you'll hear this in politics. You know, they're with the establishment.
yes.
They're with the ones that have been there forever, in other words. And so it's, you know, in politics, it's like it's almost better to be kind of the outsider sometimes. And it's like a bad word when they say, oh, he's with the establishment. He's with the ones that have been there forever and always been there and done things always the same. Well, when you have things that are kind of going the same all the time, and you throw in something new and people start going to that new, it bothers the establishment. They'll start attacking the new thing. That, you know, is something that is established, is like it is in concrete. It's like a building. It's been there for a while. It's you know, and it doesn't like to be rocked. And that's the same that goes on in our politics in our country. When something new comes in, you know, things get, and it could be from either side. And I'm not trying to be political here in any way, but you know, in each presidential campaign, each year that their presidents are voted on, there seems to be one person that kind of comes out and says, I'm not of the establishment. You know, like back in 2016, I'm not saying this to be in favor or against Donald Trump, but Donald Trump was one that was against the establishment. He was the outsider, in other words. Well, here, going back to this religion, Ali Muhammad was the outsider, and he was opposing the establishment. And again, I'm not that when I use Donald Trump as an example, I'm not putting my stamp of approval on Donald Trump, or disapproval on him. We want to talk politics. We can talk politics afterwards, and you probably would be surprised on some of the ideas I have. But anyway, back to this. Well, Ali Muhammad was called the Bab, or B-A-B. And the Bab was arrested. In 1848, violence between the Babis and the government erupted. I mean, probably something that Ted talked about. And if you did, I don't believe that Islam is a peaceful religion. They are not a peaceful religion. When Islam is the minority, they're peaceful because they're trying to evangelize and grow in numbers. And if they are violent when they're in small numbers, they'll be crushed. But if they start converting and their numbers grow, all you got to do is look at the countries and look at the percentages of Muslims in each of those countries. In Iran, over 95% of the people are Muslim. And so they are very oppressive toward any other groups of people. They are oppressive toward like Zoroasters who are in the country. They're oppressive toward Baha'is or Christians or any other group, especially Jews. And they're very violent. But then you go down to countries that have very small populations, like in the United States, relatively a smaller percentage, they're not as violent. They're more peaceful. And they kind of get into government and they kind of, and they're real peaceful and they talk about peace and love and we all need to work together while they're trying to convert. And if you see the numbers in the United States begin to grow, you're going to see violence grow in those groups. So, but anytime that Islam or Muslims, of course, are the people, Islam is the religion. When Muslims feel threatened, they will lash out. That's something that they believe that the Quran teaches in some of the jihad. Well, when this violence between the two groups erupted in situations of this nature, it is not realistic to point to one side or the other for blame. Both sides probably contributed equally. The government overreacted with force. And of course, the government is Islamic. The Babis were, I guess you could give, fault to them because they were pressing their claim that the Bab supremacy was greater and they were pressing it by force. But that was, that's what Islam was doing. The Muslims were pressing their religion by force. There's two things that when Muslims go into an area and they conquer it in history, that there's only two responses that's acceptable. And that is three, I guess you could say that to them. But number one, you convert to Islam. Or number two, you pay a tax. And you can pay a tax and survive. Or three, if you're not willing to do the other two, then it's death. Like, you're beheaded, you're done. You're out of here. So that would be, that's the only options. And that's kind of what's going on here. That's going to be their only options. Many Babis, including the Bab himself, the main guy, were executed.
Oh.
In 1850, it looked as though the movement would die out as quickly as it had arisen. I thought, because in 1850 in Iran, the Bab or Ali Muhammad and many of his followers were executed by firing squad. Ali Muhammad was only 30 years old when he died. And if you see on page 169, there would then become a type of struggle for kind of who would be the successor after the Bab or the Gate. His successor would be Mizra Yahya, and that's Yahya, a young man of noble family who had shown great devotion to the Bab. He took on the name Sub-I-Azil, which means dawn of eternity. Now, I'm not the greatest in pronouncing all these the Arabic names and things, so it might sound like, wow, he knows he knows Arabic. He can actually pronounce it. No, I'm just kind of guessing. And sometimes I listen. A lot of these, I'll watch these videos to figure out what the pronunciation is. But in the conflicts that ensued, his followers became known as Azales, Azalis, Azales. The Babs will also included the instruction that he should submit to him who God shall manifest, and that is what they believed in, a messianic figure. Since the Bab did not claim to be the Mahdi, it may be possible that this future person would be the Mahdi. So I mean, they're thinking here. You've got this the Bab, the gate. He's not claiming to be the ultimate, although they treated him as that, and they still do. They still treat him as that. But maybe one of these followers, one of these successors, would be this Mahdi. In 1863, Ali declared publicly that he was the intended successor to the Bab, and furthermore that he was he whom God shall manifest. He took on the name Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God, which may actually have been conferred to him by the Bab many years earlier. Anytime that the major leader disappears or is killed, or something happens to him, there's always a power struggle. In Islam, there was a power struggle after Muhammad, when Muhammad was getting sick. And that's where you come up with the Shias and the Sunnis, because of this power struggle. One group saying that it goes all the way, we go all the way back to Muhammad, and the other group saying, no, we go to this, and there was that big power struggle after he passed away. Well, the Babis, or his followers that became known as Baha'is, they recognized Husani Ali's leadership, and that would be the Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah. I don't know why they just can't go by John and Ralph and Peter or something. It's like when I'm in the Old Testament reading through, we've been studying Hebrew history and on Sunday morning Bible class, and I get to some of these names and I'm like, why can't they just go? I mean, Jonathan and David, that was everyone should have been named. Ruth, but then you got these long names.
Okay. So in a way, this was the hierarchy of the Baha'i. Like they have a leader or whatever they call him in the group. So he's like the hierarchy, or whatever they call him.
Yeah, the leaders, the ones that are on top. On page 169 of your textbook,
yeah,
there's a chart there, and it goes down. It shows that the two divisions, but most of the people went by the way of Baha'u'llah, and then that direction, rather than going. You can see in the chart, it kind of goes and stops with one guy, and it doesn't go any further. But then with the Baha'u'llah, he continues, and even up to today, there's actually not necessarily a leader. There's more of a representative authority, kind of like a group. Baha'u'llah began to preach a faith for the world. He wrote letters to some of the royalty of Europe, exhorting them to work for peace in a united world. Although he was technically in prison for most of the rest of his life, Baha'u'llah was able to exert much influence through his books, letters, and personal interviews. His writings include the Most Holy Book, the Book of Certitudes, and the Hidden Words. Those are three major writings of his. And of course, they had Arabic names, and one of them, it's like Kitab Akadas. That was called the Most Holy Book. Most, religions have their own textbook that are, the Islam has the Quran. And that's why I do separate Mormons from Christians. Mormons, they have their own kind of hierarchy of writings. They have the Book of Mormon that they put on the same level as the Bible. They also have the Doctrine of Covenants and Pearl of Great Price or something. But the Book of Mormon is that high level writing, supposedly by Joseph Smith, which most believe that it was stolen. It was actually supposed to be some sort of fictional novel that someone else wrote, and he stole it, made it into like a Bible. But anyway, the Jehovah's Witness, they don't necessarily, they have their writings from the Watchtower Society, but what they've done to the Bible is that they have added words and changed definitions to fit their religion. So they have really distorted the Bible. They have their own translation called the New World Translation that says, instead of the idea of Christ being there making all things, it adds the word other. All other things were made by him, and all other things were made for him, because they believe that Jesus was a created being, like an angel. Well, back to the Baha'is. By the time that Baha'u'llah passed away, he died in 1892. He was recognized by his followers as the great manifestation, namely the ultimate prophet. It almost seems like that he superseded the one that began the whole religion, the Bab. He left the old Babi faith behind as a separate precursor religion, most of whose members had joined Baha'i. The Azalis were not much more than a memory. Remember, that was the guy that first kind of came off. He was the one that kind of veered off a little bit at the, kind of said that he was the successor. Well, Baha'u'llah ultimately became the successor. And that's why when you do look at your textbook on page 169, you see that chart and you see, well, that one guy that kind of goes off to the right, drops down, and then there's nothing after him. Well, that's because they die away, that kind of group, and they get assimilated into the main Baha'i religion. Any questions or comments? I know there's a lot of historical information, and you're maybe trying to kind of focus on this rather than maybe football scores or something else, but or what you're going to eat for lunch. But the reason that we go through this is you might come in contact with someone. I live in Jacksonville. Jacksonville has, they have all these different religious groups. They have this group. One of our elders has been working with a guy, talking to a guy who believes in this Hebrew Israelite type. You can look that up on your own time, but they're fanatics when it comes to religion. And you can follow that and see what that is all about. But what he has done, what our elder has done, is done research. He goes home, and of course, the great thing about the internet is you get on there, you can find out a lot of stuff. YouTube has lots of videos on groups and their history, where they come from, what their beliefs are. Because if you come in contact, don't just say, well, I'll just teach them the Bible. They might believe the Bible, but they're going to skew it a little bit different. You got to be ready. I am sure that Brother Beals is ready for Thursday. Do you think? Or do you think that he's just kind of going, oh, I know what they'll teach. I can go in this without even looking anything up. You think he's done that? I mean, has he been there to talk too much about the debate?
No.
No,
Oh, they got him secluded somewhere on his stuff. Okay. I am so much looking forward to that. I just can't wait. I am so much looking forward to Thursday and watching that. And if you guys are on Facebook, and if you haven't done it yet, make sure you post that. You know, I've posted on my Facebook page, and I'll post it again probably tomorrow, reminding people and Thursday to get on and watch it, because I think this is something, and we're talking about world religions, and I know that he's going up against a guy from the United Methodist Church, but this idea of homosexuality is not going to go away. It's not something, and it's not new either. I mean, this thing's been around forever. You go all the way back to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
That's Genesis, if I got that correct. You know, that's way back. And so, I mean, homosexuality, these perversions, have been around for centuries, if not, and millennia, actually. So we've got to stand up, and I'm ready. I'm going to take notes. I'm very fascinated at what's going to happen Thursday night. And I know that Brother Beals is going to be all over this. I mean, and hopefully, I don't know if this guy will change. I pray that he would, but I think that this is a great opportunity to change some hearts and minds that'll be in that auditorium or in that denominational church building. But anyway, we learn these things. We learn about these groups to understand who they are, what they believe, and what they teach, so that when we do come in contact with them, we can talk to them. Remember, there are over 118,000 members of the Baha'i faith in the United States. They even have a temple in the United States. And so most countries, I saw one thing that said every country has Baha'is in their country. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, but virtually almost every country has Baha'is, just like almost every country, virtually every country has Muslims or Christians in their country. So, and that's why, you know, I think when Ted took a big emphasis on Islam, because wherever you go, you're going to find Muslims, wherever you go. And if you have the opportunity to do mission work, and you might run into a lot of the Baha'is, you might be over in the Middle East or doing mission work, or in India or some other country, Pakistan, and you actually might be thinking right now, oh, I'll never be in Pakistan. Don't ever say never, because never is a long time. I remember saying I'd never live in Ohio, and I lived there for 25 years. And I actually married an Ohioan, which I was set when I was younger. I was focused on the fact that I was going to marry a Southern girl. I married the Northern girl. So don't ever say, never say never. Because like I said, never is a long time. You say, I'll never be a missionary. And you might wake up one morning in Iran, teaching people. And you might wake up one day in India or in some other country. And if you do have opportunity to go and teach somewhere in a foreign country or to do mission work, take the opportunity, even if it's a week long, and go. We're planning here to go to Costa Rica next July. You know, if you have opportunities to go to any country, go. I think we talked about this last time. Some of you have been on a mission trip, right?
Yes.
Just it's a great place. And when you have children and they're old enough, I wouldn't suggest if you're going on a week-long trip to take little kids, but like I took my daughter twice when she was a senior in high school and right out of high school, and then I took my son once. I wanted them to experience what it was like in a different country. But all right, back to our text here. Let's I want to look at some things about some of the beliefs. First of all, their belief of creation. And this is, I'm actually now jumping from the textbook. Actually, before I get into that, there is one more thing I wanted to pinpoint here. On page 171, and I have it starred here, there is a list, and it has all these different men. Some of them in that list you'll recognize right away. You might recognize all those names. But the Baha'is religion, they look at that there are different people that have come up, in this case men, that have come through the ages. They come directly from God to make like they're like a spokesman to direct the people. And it all goes back to Abraham. Here's another religion that pushes their faith back to Abraham. You know, the major religions in the world, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and now the Baha'is, they all look at Abraham as kind of the founder. Well, they look at Abraham as the main guy, the father of all the nations. Well, the Bible teaches us that he would be the father of all nations. Well, then the next guy on the list is Krishna. Anybody know who Krishna is? Krishna is the god, the main deity of Hinduism, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Hindus. And then Moses. What do you think Moses would be the kind of the lead of in their minds? What did Moses get at Mount Sinai?
The Ten Commandments.
Right, and that was directed just to who?
To the Jewish, to the people that were
Just
Egypt.
the Israelites, the Jews. The Ten Commandments were not for the Gentiles; they were for the Jews.
Yeah.
Well, in their list, of course, that was to them. Moses was a major figure that was that came from God, in their view, to direct a certain group. The next one is Zoroaster. We talked about last week. The Zoroastrianism. They, of course, they believe and teach that Zoroaster was a person that came to give direction.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one was Buddha, and of course you have a whole religion, Buddhism. Then Jesus. They believe that Jesus came and started Christianity. And then Muhammad was a prophet. All these are prophets: Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. They believe all of them are prophets of God.
Mm.
And then the Bab, and then Baha'u'llah. And that is their list, and that is their leadership history. And it starts, of course, with, like I said, with Abraham, and goes all the way down to the Bab and Baha'u'llah, which is interesting that they put two of their leaders on the list. And they kind of look at Jesus. They say that Jesus, even though he was a Jew, was kind of the director, leader of Christianity. All right, so now let's look at some of their major beliefs. And this I'm going off of some of my notes here. You'll see it on your some of these things on your summary sheet that I sent you. But first of all, I want to look at, I always like to look at how did they view creation. Every one of these groups. When we look at Hinduism, you know, we'll look and see how they view how things were created. But like the creator, the universe is eternal and has no beginning or end. That's very similar to the Zoroastrians. They had that similar belief. They teach that the beauty and diversity of the natural world is an expression of the creator's attributes. The knowledge of God can be gained by studying the created world. You can look at the world and know God by studying the created world. They believe that humans are not to worship nature. However, as stewards of the earth, they should maintain respect for the environment and take care of natural resources. I don't have any problem with that. I think we should take care of what God has blessed us with. That's not meaning that we should go to an extreme and not use anything, as some extremists are today, where they believe that you know, we need to get rid of fossil fuels and all of that. God gave us this earth to use. We have oil in the ground to use. There's other fuels, other ways of gaining energy. You have, when you see a huge dam, many times that dam is set up to where it's the hydropower, the hydroelectric power, that water power that comes through that turning turbines to create energy. You have wind turbines. In Costa Rica, on top of the mountains, you will see these wind turbines all across, harvesting the energy from the wind. And like it says, we're not to worship nature. One thing I want you to be careful. We talked about last time as well, be careful with words. And something that it's taken me a long time to try to get my mind around and work on, and that is this idea of Mother Nature. Don't say Mother Nature. All right, Mother Nature actually comes from an idea of idol worship and the worshiping of nature. I know that it doesn't mean that when we say it, but there is no such thing as Mother Nature. You know, God created all things. I say nature. And you know, don't go and correct someone, especially, you know, others might say that and they just mean nature. They don't mean it in the originality of the word. But again, we do need to be careful with our words and what we say. Father time is another one that we got to be careful with. It's again, it's pulling away from the deity of God the Father, and that God the Father is in control of all things. I wrote an article in the bulletin here about a year ago about Mother Nature, that term, and Father Time, and where they originated. And so, you know, again, I used to say Mother Nature all the time, and then I don't know if it was, I don't think it was anyone that told me I was reading something and came across the original where that came from, and I was kind of shocked that I was saying it, and so I really conditioned myself to try to be careful. And that's kind of the idea. Sometimes people say Mother Nature. We'll be looking at Native American religious traditions, and they worship nature, a lot of nature, and so that Mother Nature would be prevalent in their language. So we just got to be careful. That's a little side note. You're not going to lose your soul if you say Mother Nature, but I'm just saying, you know, again, we do have to be careful with what the words that we use and the sayings that we come up with. I posted something, my article, I think on YouTube, or not on YouTube, on Facebook, and a couple members of the church, friends of mine up north, got all upset with me And I think a lot of it was because they say it all the time and they were just embarrassed. I mean, don't be embarrassed if you say it. I mean, we don't mean it as the original word, but I'm just, I'll leave that there. But that goes with the idea of humans are not to worship nature. That's their belief. Well, that's our belief as well. We don't worship nature. We worship God.
Mhm.
Their belief of deity. Deity, God is the supreme, transcendent creator of the universe and is all knowing and all loving. Fits perfectly with scripture and what the Bible says. Different religions identify God by different names because the human mind is limited and cannot fully comprehend deity. And that's what they believe. They say that they identify God by certain names because they don't understand God. For this reason, and again, I'm just going by what they believe. God uses progressive revelation to teach religious truths to humanity. And that goes with the idea that he sends messengers, different messengers that have different backgrounds. And these messengers, God intervenes in human history throughout prophets or divine messengers who are each considered manifestations of God. Going back to that list, Abraham, Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah are all messengers, they believe, of God that are prophets, divine messengers, manifestations of God. There's only one in that entire list that is God. Who is it?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yep. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 14. So the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Glory is only of the Father, the only begotten of the Father. And so the Word is Jesus, Jesus Christ. They believe that these messengers provide a level of spiritual guidance that can be understood at the time of their appearance and are often followed by a period of extraordinary human progress. So if you look, what they're saying is that you look at each one of these and you see how the humans have progressed so rapidly right after. Not necessarily, but that's what they believe. Humanity. They believe that all humans have an eternal soul and are equal in the sight of God, regardless of gender, race, or social class. Well, amen to that. Absolutely. Therefore, the unity of humanity should be pursued above all else while still celebrating and maintaining its diversity. I believe that we should be united. The Bible teaches in the book of Acts that we all come from one blood. All the nations are from one blood. We might look different on the outside. Not all of us are as pretty as I am, but that's we can't help that. But on the inside, everything, we all come from one blood. We all can date ourselves back to ultimately through Noah, back to Adam. I remember my brother did one of those DNA tests, DNA 23andMe or something like that, and they sent it to me because, of course, we're brothers, and it said on there that our family is probably 2.8% Middle Eastern. And so now what I tell people is that proves that I'm a direct descendant of Noah. Did I already use that joke? We'll just let that kind of simmer there. All of you are direct descendants of Noah. Anyway, prohibitions and permissions. They say you must avoid alcohol, tobacco, and mind-altering drugs. That's similar to Islam faith. No alcohol, no tobacco, no mind-altering drugs. Gossip and speaking ill of others are considered especially harmful behaviors. Sexual relations outside marriages are prohibited. Interfaith marriages are prohibited, and interracial marriages are encouraged. So they say, we don't want you to marry someone outside your faith, but they encourage interracial marriages. And of course, the Bible doesn't condemn either of those. It is probably wise not to marry someone that's not a Christian. That's only just dealing with wisdom, but it's not a sin necessarily. It's wise to marry a Christian because you both, you can help each other as Christians and develop each other's faith. Of course, there's no prohibition throughout anywhere in Scripture that prohibits interracial relationships or marriages, none whatsoever. I grew up in an area of the country that some people believe that, but they couldn't prove it. And it was so disheartening when, especially my dad would preach sermons. He would preach sermons, and in that sermon, he would talk about how that there is nothing sinful about interracial marriages. And I was surprised that there were people in that congregation that had never heard that before. And they had said they never heard that preached before. Well, it should have been preached forever, because again, the Bible doesn't teach against it, and neither should we. But that's one of their permissions and that they actually encourage interracial marriages and relationships. Working for the overall good of society is emphasized, but it must promote the unity of mankind. In other words, so the good of society must have an underlying effect of unity. You can't look at the good of society by destroying unity, by kicking all people out, but you're trying to get to that could mean compromise. And of course, compromise is fine as long as it doesn't violate Scripture with Christians, with us. Yes, sir.
I'm looking at the 10. Can we go over those 10? The difference between the 10 and it's on page 172. They have like we have 10 commandments. They have 10 something.
In the book?
Yeah, it's in the book.
Yes. Yeah, I think I've got this listed just a little bit different, because this I'm taking these from my notes that I've taught this before.
Okay.
And but it's pretty much all of this is in those 10. You just I'm just wording it a little bit different, and the only reason is because I'm used to what my notes say here, and I've got them organized a little bit different. But yeah, you could go by that. That is,
I know we have the original 10 commandments. They have like 10, but behind is.
yeah, they can.
We go for the original 10 commandments. Everybody has their own commandments, I guess.
Yeah, Buddha has the 10 precepts.
Okay.
That are in Buddhism, and 10 is a kind of a good number. There's they kind of come from the writings of Baha'u'llah.
Okay.
So
I'm just looking at it. I'm surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
One of they forbid the practice. This is interesting. They forbid the practice of partisan politics. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if we didn't have partisan politics?
It would.
But they're big on unity. They're big on everything that must be united. We believe that we are united in Christ. That's what Jesus prayed for in John 17. He prayed for unity of all the brethren, and that they be but they not be unified in just whatever they want to believe, right? They'd be unified in what?
In him as he is in the Father.
Yes, exactly. In Christ, as he is with the Father, in him. They're to be united in Christ, not in Muhammad, not in the world, and definitely not in the idea that we just kind of, we're going to agree to disagree. Well, if it comes to salvation, I'm going to go with the Bible every time.
Yes, we too.
If it has to do with, who's going to win the World Series, well, then I don't care.
I don't care.
Believe whatever you want. If you want to follow the Phillies, that's fine. They're in the World Series. I don't know if anybody's else. I don't know if the other side's been decided yet, but you can be whoever you want to be as long as you're not a Steelers fan.
That's the reason I'm taking this course, so I can understand things.
Yep. All right, their worship. They have congregational worship plays only a very small role in the Baha'i faith. If followers meet in community, it is usually an informal home prayer gathering or at monthly feasts to build unity and fellowship. While food is not always central to these feasts, they mostly revolve around prayer, scripture readings, and administrative discussions. A community meal is sometimes served. These gatherings are known as 19-day feasts because they occur at that frequency according to the Baha'i calendar. 19 days, every 19 days. The soul. This is what they believe about the soul. First, the human soul exists at the moment of conception. True. Considered the beginning of human life, but in a separate form from the physical embryo. Now, the Zoroastrians have that. Okay, they kind of have this idea that the soul is out there and it unites with the unborn at birth. It represents a person's most essential identity, including the individual's thoughts, understanding, and imagination. They believe that the soul is also immortal and after death will continue toward unity with God. Of course, the Bible teaches that the soul is created and it is created at conception, and that we don't live before conception. That's what makes Christ, of course, his birth so different and his conception so different, because he was poured into, he was forever. He was born, he was not born or created, and he did not have a beginning, nor does he have an end. We have a beginning, but we do not have an end. Our physical bodies have an end, but our spiritual bodies do not. Salvation. This is what they view, their view on salvation. They believe that salvation is not a singular event, a liberation from sin, or an achievement of a state of transcendence. Instead, they believe it is a process by which an individual draws closer to God. Men and women cannot achieve personal salvation on their own. They must rely upon and recognize the teachings of Baha'u'llah as a type of mediator between humanity and God. So they've got to look at all the teachings, all the writings, and if you look, when you look on your summary sheet, you'll see text, TEXTS, and there'll be a long list, and these are all different writings of the Baha'is, and their beliefs are in those writings. Together, the Baha'i community also works to bring about a more universal salvation for humankind through the pursuit of unity and peace. And there's that word again, unity. They're huge on unity. They want peace and unity, things brought together. You probably won't see Baha'is really rising up and trying to conquer a nation like the Islamic past have been, because they want peace. Baha'u'llah wrote, as we said, and the one before him, the Bab, wrote to European royalty asking, begging for peace and having peace and unity in their country and with other countries. All right, funeral rites. A lot of times different religions might have different ways of going about specifically their funeral. Well, if possible, they bury their dead less than an hour's journey from the place where the individual died, with feet pointed toward Qubal, where Baha'u'llah is buried. So if you're going to bury someone from the Baha'i religion, their feet, okay, there must be pointed to where Baha'u'llah was buried. You remember in Islam, the Muslims, when they pray, where do they pray toward? No matter where, huh? No matter where they are in the world, they always pray toward what?
Mecca.
Mecca, exactly. They will always in that direction. Well, here, when someone from the Baha'i faith dies, their feet have to be pointed toward Baha'u'llah, the supreme leader, or he's like the second one down after the organizer. Now, sometimes when we're thinking about this guy, again, remember this guy lived in the late 1800s. So it's not like this is someone from thousands of years ago. So he's not been gone for very long relative to all of time. So like some of the other, like Muhammad and others that died, centuries ago. Attendees at a Baha'i funeral must together recite the prayer for the dead, the face-only obligated congregational prayer. And if I would have thought about it, I would have looked that up. I just thought about, but you can look that up somewhere, like the prayer for the dead of the Baha'i religion, and you can see what that looks like. Death and afterlife. Their beliefs about an afterlife are not well defined, and its founders did not teach the existence of heaven or hell. Though these doctrines appear in the scriptures of other religions, they should be understood symbolically, according to the Baha'i religion. The Baha'is do believe in the eternity of the soul after death, and that the disembodied soul continues along a path toward joy, perfection, and unity with God. There's that word again, unity. The next life will be as different from one's present life as the world is for a child emerging from a mother's womb. So they're saying that, again, it's not going to be anything like living here on earth. All right, there are about 12 different major texts. I think I listed all of them there, maybe even a couple of 3, 6. Yeah, all 12 are listed on that summary sheet. You can look them up. The first one on the list there is the first theological work written after the Bab's 1844 declaration. That word, that very first one there, means the enduring of names, and is considered the equivalent of the Quran for the Bab's followers. So that first one on the list, Qayyam al-Azma, that is like the Quran for the Babis. There are some ceremonial practices here in the last 5 minutes that we'll look at. They're listed on your summary sheet. But they have worship, what they call worship through work. Worship through work, every individual should seek to perform honest work, a trade, or a profession to the best of his or her abilities for the good of society. In good, unity, peace, that's something that they continually preach. Work performed in this spirit of service to mankind is considered a form of worship equivalent to prayer. They have what is called devotional prayer. Baha'is believe prayer is a natural impulse and are expected to pray on a regular basis. The purpose of prayer is to improve dedication or devotion and or request assistance from God. In addition to praying in their own words, they may use prayers written by the Bab and the Baha'u'llah or other spiritual leaders. In many Baha'i meetings, participants may take turns reading from a prayer book. Of course, prayer for Christians is a communication that we have with God. You know, we don't go and, you know, there's some Christian religions that actually use what they call the quote unquote, the Lord's Prayer, right? And they'll quote it over and over and over again. Well, that prayer, that's not something that Christians are to recite. That was an example. You know, the idea of teach us to pray. And Christ is showing them how to pray. And of course, in that prayer, Jesus prayed that the kingdom come, the kingdom has come. So praying that would be, is not needed. They have meditation. There's obligatory prayers, that is the daily reciting of required prayers that they have. They're written. It says actually beginning at the age of 15, every Baha'i should say one of 3 prayers every day while facing the shrine of Baha'u'llah. Meditation. Baha'u'llah taught that meditation led to significant human progress and should be part of every individual's devotional practice. Fasting. Like Muslims, with the month of Ramadan, the Baha'i faith sets aside an annual period of fasting, believing that self-restraint prepares the soul for spiritual awakening. The Baha'i month of Allah, A-L-A, lasts from March 2nd to March 20th. Baha'is fast from sunrise to sunset during this time. Well, during Ramadan, the Muslims will also fast between sunrise and sunset. And there is a pilgrimage, and this will be the last thing that we talk about here. You can look up their holy days and some of the other things that are listed, but during his exile, followers of Baha'u'llah made pilgrimage to visit him in Akka, what is now the city of Acre in present-day Israel. Today, Baha'u'llah's shrine in Acre and the shrine of Bab in Haifa, Israel, have become pilgrimage sites for members of the Baha'i faith. These pilgrimages usually last 9 days. So where do Muslims, where do they pilgrimage to?
Mecca.
Right. They're supposed to sometime in their lifetime make this great pilgrimage to Mecca. Here, they're also to make this trek to Baha'u'llah's place or shrine. There is the house of Bab that's in Shiraz, Iran, and the recently destroyed house of Buhamullah in Baghdad, Iraq, have been considered pilgrimage sites in the past, but are not accessible to most Baha'is. If you're an American citizen and a Baha'i, you cannot go to Iran and visit that shrine, most likely, because it's very difficult to get in. All right, if you think of a question or something, let me know. I see that you guys have sent the memory work in. Appreciate that. I will right after we're done here, I'll go ahead and send the other 2 for next week. You should know probably what those are, right? You're working on those.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you're ready and you got them done, you can send them back. That way you can just get ahead of the game.
And next time we'll start on chapter 7.
That is correct. Yes.
I have a question for you. Would you
Okay.
be able to send me the notes so I could, what you have written?
I have it. I'll get it printed out for you right now.
Okay,
You mean the, oh, those are the summary sheets? Let me, I will send, Trevor, I'll send you my other notes that I have.
okay.
The other notes you have?
Yeah, the more drawn out. I think I just sent you the summary sheets.
Okay, I mean, do you want the summary sheets or the?
Yes, I want both of them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can send you that other stuff too, but the summary sheet just gives you an outline, and then you can look up those different things and kind of do some research on your own. It gives you, but I'll try to make sure. I don't know if I have all of, somewhere I've lost. I don't know if it deleted or something copied over it, but I'll look for all of my notes on world religion, but I've got the ones that we're going to be studying. So
No, it's very interesting to
Yeah.
learn, okay?
I think it is. I think it is very interesting. Go ahead and stop our recording.